What would you do if someone ripped your dress just because they thought you didn't belong? Vanessa didn't raise her voice, but her silence changed everything. The room fell silent. Not the kind of quiet that comes after a speech or a toast. This was heavier, the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle. Every head in the Harborview Hotel ballroom turned toward the same spot near the grand staircase. A torn strip of fabric dangled from someone's hand, and standing there, completely still, was Vanessa Colton. Her gold gown, once flawless, shimmering under the chandelier, now had a jagged tear down the side. Her fingers gripped what was left of it, her chest rising slowly as she tried to steady her breathing. The woman in front of her, older, pale, and perfectly composed moments ago, now had a different look, a mix of shock and fake confusion. You could have heard a pin drop. Glasses were half raised in the air, mid-toast, frozen. The band had stopped playing. The hotel's manager stood near the entrance, unsure whether to step in or not. "Excuse me?" Vanessa's voice was calm, almost too calm. "What did you just do?" The older woman blinked, her lips curling slightly. "Well, maybe next time you should be careful before walking around pretending to belong somewhere you don't." That was it. That sentence. Those few words cut sharper than the torn dress ever could. But let's rewind a bit. Just 15 minutes earlier, everything seemed perfect. The Harborview Hotel, sitting right by the waterfront in Savannah, Georgia, had never looked better. Strings of lights framed the ballroom windows, soft jazz floated through the air, and guests in sparkling gowns and tuxedos chatted over champagne. This was the annual Harborview Youth Fund Gala, a charity event meant to raise money for after-school programs across the city. It was one of those events where everyone who mattered in Savannah's business circle showed up, or at least wanted to be seen showing up. And right in the middle of it all was Vanessa Colton, 31 years old, confident but modest, known by many for her design work and her warm personality. She wasn't born into wealth, far from it, but she'd built her name, one client at a time, starting from a small studio on the south side of town. Tonight, she wasn't there to show off. She was there because she'd donated the evening's main auction item, a custom gown that had already drawn a bidding war before the night even started. Beside her was her husband, Grant Colton, a quiet man with a thoughtful presence. He wasn't one to talk much about money, but everyone in the room knew who he was, one of the city's most successful investors, known for his calm nature and his generous heart. Vanessa leaned toward him, smiling as the event host announced that their foundation had just funded a new arts program for local kids. "You hear that?" she whispered. "That's why I wanted to come tonight." Grant smiled. "And that's why everyone loves you," he said softly. But as Vanessa walked away to greet an old friend near the bar, someone else's eyes followed her. Someone who didn't recognize her name, didn't care about her work, and made a decision in seconds based on nothing but assumptions. That someone was Evelyn Grant, one of the event's biggest donors, and as people often said behind her back, the kind of woman who thinks the world revolves around her table. Evelyn had noticed Vanessa talking with guests, laughing, moving gracefully through the room. But in Evelyn's mind, Vanessa didn't fit the picture. Not here, not in this ballroom. So when Evelyn saw Vanessa pause near a tray of champagne glasses, reaching to grab one herself, she made her move. "Finally," Evelyn muttered, under her breath, waving her fingers impatiently. "Could you get me one of those? The chilled ones, not the flat ones. Please hurry." Vanessa blinked, unsure if she was being serious. "I'm sorry." Evelyn frowned, her tone sharpening. "You heard me." "You're serving, aren't you?" The air between them stiffened. For a moment, Vanessa just stood there, half in disbelief, half deciding whether to laugh or correct her. But she chose grace, always grace. "No, ma'am," Vanessa said gently. "I'm not staff. I'm just—" But Evelyn's hand was already in motion, and that's when it happened. A few hours before the gala began, Vanessa Colton stood in front of her full-length mirror at the Harborview suite, adjusting the final pin in her hair. Her reflection looked calm, but inside, her heart was fluttering. It wasn't nerves. It was pride. Her gown, the one she'd spent weeks designing and stitching herself, was finally complete. Gold satin cut to flow effortlessly, with subtle embroidery near the waist, just enough detail to show artistry without shouting for attention. It wasn't just a dress, it was a piece of her story. Grant appeared behind her, straightening his tie. "You look like you designed it for a queen," he said, leaning against the doorway. Vanessa smiled, smoothing the skirt. Maybe I did. Just didn't know I'd be wearing it. She turned toward him. Do you remember when I first told you I wanted to design gowns full-time? He nodded. You were still sewing at the kitchen table, using those old fabric scraps your aunt gave you. And everyone said I should find something more stable, she said, rolling her eyes with a smirk. Now look where we are. Grant walked over, his hand finding hers. I knew you'd make it. You don't stop until you do. There was a quiet confidence in him, the kind that didn't need to prove anything. Together, they made an unlikely pair in the eyes of Savannah's old money crowd, the self-made millionaire investor and the black designer who'd carved her way up through sheer persistence and talent. But to them, it wasn't about class or status. It was about building something meaningful. When they arrived downstairs, the valet already recognized them. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Colton, he said, opening the door to their black sedan. Beautiful night for the gala. Vanessa smiled warmly. Thank you, Marcus. Hope you get to catch some of that live music later. That was Vanessa, kind to everyone, from the servers to the donors. She never saw people as positions, just people. Inside the ballroom, it was a world of glittering crystal chandeliers, laughter echoing off marble floors, and the faint scent of fresh lilies. Savannah's elite mingled effortlessly, talking about stock portfolios, foundation dinners, and travel plans. But Vanessa wasn't the kind to get lost in conversation for appearances. She preferred the corners, the quiet spaces where real stories lived. Mrs. Colton, someone called. It was Marjorie Chen, a local art teacher and longtime friend. I just wanted to thank you for sponsoring my students' exhibit last month. They've been talking about you nonstop. Vanessa chuckled. They're the ones with the talent. I just gave them fabric. A small group of people gathered around her. Donors, artists, and even 2 high school girls volunteering at the event. She spoke to them like equals, listening more than she talked. But across the room, not everyone shared that view. Evelyn Grant, perfectly styled in pearls and a tailored cream suit, had already made a mental note. She leaned toward her friend, whispering behind her glass of white wine, It's just sad, really. Some people don't know when to stay in their lane. Her friend gave a hesitant laugh, the kind you give when you don't want to be part of something ugly but don't have the courage to stop it. Vanessa didn't notice the looks. She was too focused on joy. The auction was starting soon, and she couldn't wait to see how much her gown would raise for the foundation. When she finally excused herself to grab a drink, she moved with easy grace. Guests smiled at her as she passed, some out of genuine respect, others out of curiosity. The waiter with the tray of champagne stopped briefly to refill glasses. Vanessa reached for one, and that's when she felt a tap on her shoulder. A sharp voice followed. Finally! I've been waiting. Do you mind getting me one too? At first, she thought it was someone joking, but when she turned and met Evelyn's cold stare, she realized it wasn't. Vanessa smiled politely. I think there's a waiter right behind you who can help. Evelyn's lips tightened. Excuse me? You're not staff? No, ma'am, Vanessa said, still gentle, though her eyes betrayed her discomfort. I'm a guest here. Evelyn tilted her head, eyes narrowing, as if the words didn't make sense. Oh, of course you are. She chuckled, but there was nothing kind in it. The tension could have ended there, but Evelyn's pride, or maybe her prejudice, refused to let go. And as Vanessa turned to leave, that's when Evelyn reached out, and everything changed. Evelyn Grant had been attending the Harborview Gala for nearly 2 decades, and in her mind, that meant she owned the room. The staff greeted her by name, the photographers always seemed to find her first, and the event organizers made sure her seat was front and center, every single year. She wasn't from Savannah originally. She'd married into an old money family from Charleston, but she'd spent years cultivating the right friendships, the right charities, the right image. And tonight, she intended to keep it that way. That's why when she saw Vanessa Colton walking across the ballroom, poised, radiant, confident, something in Evelyn tightened. It wasn't just that Vanessa stood out. It was that she seemed comfortable. Too comfortable for someone Evelyn didn't recognize. Evelyn's world revolved around names, family names, business names, last names printed on plaques and invitations. But she'd never heard Colton before. To her, that meant one of 2 things, either new money or no money at all. As Vanessa walked past the champagne table, Evelyn's curiosity turned into irritation. She thought Vanessa was smiling too much, talking too freely, and looking too elegant for someone who hadn't earned her place. "Excuse me," Evelyn said sharply, tapping her manicured nails against the glass she held. "Would you be a dear and grab me one of those chilled ones?" Vanessa turned, surprised. "Oh, I don't work here, ma'am." Evelyn blinked as if she hadn't heard correctly. "You don't what?" "I'm not staff," Vanessa said again, her voice soft but steady. "I'm attending the event." Evelyn's eyes traveled slowly from Vanessa's shoes to her neckline, as if scanning for proof of her words. Her lips curved into a mocking half-smile. "Well," she said with a short laugh, "that's unexpected." People nearby started glancing over. Conversations quieted. The shift in energy was quick, sharp, like a match catching flame. Vanessa could have walked away, and maybe she should have. But she didn't. She looked Evelyn right in the eye and said, "It shouldn't be." Evelyn tilted her head, tone dripping with condescension. "Oh, darling, don't take things so personally. I just thought you were one of the servers, that's all. It's a compliment, really. You look efficient." The way she said efficient made Vanessa's stomach tighten, but she refused to give Evelyn the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. "Thank you for the compliment," she replied evenly, "but maybe next time just ask before assuming." The crowd was listening now. A few guests exchanged awkward looks. Others pretended to be deeply fascinated by the flower arrangements. But Evelyn didn't stop. Her ego had been bruised, and she wanted to win the moment. "Oh, come now," she said, letting out a sharp laugh. "You can't seriously be offended by a simple mistake. You people are always so—" She didn't finish the sentence. Maybe she realized how close she was to crossing a line she couldn't take back, or maybe she didn't care. Vanessa took a small step back, choosing calm over chaos. "Enjoy your evening, ma'am." That should have been the end of it, but Evelyn reached forward, grabbed the fabric of Vanessa's gown near the hip, and said, "Don't walk away from me while I'm talking to you." There was a ripping sound, loud, jagged, unmistakable. Gasps filled the air. One woman dropped her glass. The music stopped again, mid-note. Vanessa's hand went instinctively to the tear in her dress. For a moment, she didn't move. Her mind went blank. The humiliation hit her before the pain. Evelyn froze, realizing what she'd done. But pride is a powerful thing. Instead of apologizing, she straightened her posture and said, "Well, maybe next time you'll think twice before pretending to be something you're not." The words echoed like a slap across the ballroom. Vanessa blinked once, twice. Her throat tightened, but her voice, steady as steel, cut through the air. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've worked for, but you just showed everyone exactly who you are." A murmur spread through the crowd. People were whispering now, some pulling out their phones, others shaking their heads. A waiter stepped forward, unsure whether to intervene, and from the back of the room, one man had already begun walking toward them. Tall, calm, quiet, his face unreadable, his tuxedo crisp, his eyes locked on the scene ahead. Grant Colton. But no one knew yet who he was, or how the next few minutes would turn the entire evening upside down. Grant Colton didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked, his steps steady, deliberate. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. Every eye in the ballroom followed him as he made his way toward Vanessa, who stood frozen in place, still clutching her torn dress. The shimmer of the fabric now looked like a wound under the light. Evelyn turned slightly, pretending she didn't notice him at first, but her posture shifted. Shoulders stiffening, chin lifting, like someone caught but refusing to admit it. Grant stopped just beside Vanessa. His presence alone filled the silence. He looked at her first, not saying a word, just scanning her face, her eyes glistening, her breathing shallow. Then, gently, he placed his hand over hers, covering the tear. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Vanessa swallowed hard, forcing a nod. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled. Grant exhaled, turning to Evelyn. "You tore my wife's dress." The word wife hit the room like a thunderclap. A few gasps slipped out. Someone whispered, "That's his wife?" While another muttered, "Oh my God." Evelyn blinked, her confidence faltering for the first time. "Wait, your wife?" she stammered. Grant's voice didn't waver. "Yes, my wife." Vanessa Colton. He paused. You know, the woman whose gown was auctioned tonight for $50,000. The one you were bidding on before you lost. Evelyn's face went pale. I didn't realize. That's the problem, Grant interrupted, still composed, but with an unmistakable edge. You didn't realize because you didn't care to. The crowd stayed silent, watching, waiting. Even the hotel staff stood still. Vanessa could feel every heartbeat in her chest. She didn't want this scene, this public humiliation, not for her, not even for Evelyn. But it was too late to undo what had already happened. Evelyn tried to recover, forcing a smile. Mr. Colton, I'm terribly sorry for the misunderstanding. It was an honest mistake. Grant raised an eyebrow. Honest? Evelyn nodded quickly. Yes, of course. I just thought she was one of the servers, that's all. These things happen. He took a step closer. No, they don't just happen. You didn't see a server, Mrs. Grant. You saw a woman who didn't fit the picture you had in your head, and instead of questioning that picture, you acted on it. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came out. The confidence she'd worn like a badge was gone. Vanessa touched Grant's arm softly. Grant, she said under her breath, trying to calm him. But he wasn't angry, not in the way most people expected. His tone was too even, too controlled. That made it worse for Evelyn. Mrs. Grant, he continued, my wife worked for years to be here. She built her career from nothing. Every stitch in that dress, the one you just tore, came from her hands. She spent nights sewing while other people slept, all because she believed in creating something beautiful out of hard work. He glanced toward the crowd, and now, in a room full of people meant to represent generosity and charity, she's standing here being humiliated for existing in a space she earned. Someone near the back clapped once, then stopped, unsure if it was the right moment. But the sound broke the tension just enough for Vanessa to take a breath. Evelyn's face flushed deep red. Mr. Colton, I truly didn't mean any harm. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice soft but strong. You may not have meant harm, but that doesn't mean you didn't cause it. The words hung in the air. Vanessa could have walked away, but instead, she took a small step forward, the kind of step that carried years of dignity behind it. When I walked into this room tonight, she said, I came to celebrate the programs we're funding for young people, kids who dream big even when the world tells them to dream small. I came here to raise money, not to raise my voice. She glanced at her torn dress. But maybe this needed to happen. Because sometimes people like you need a reminder that kindness isn't about who you sit next to. It's about how you treat the people you think no one's watching. The guests began murmuring again, their faces heavy with realization. Grant reached into his pocket, pulled out his checkbook, and handed a signed slip to the host standing nearby. Add another 100,000 to the donation, he said, in my wife's name. The host nodded silently, unsure what to say. Evelyn took a step back, eyes glistening. For the first time, she seemed smaller, not in size, but in spirit. I'm sorry, she whispered. It wasn't loud enough for everyone to hear, but Vanessa did. Vanessa simply nodded. I hope you mean that. And then she turned to the crowd, shoulders straight, chin high, the very picture of grace. Let's get back to what tonight was supposed to be about, she said. Helping kids believe in themselves, because that's something no one should ever try to tear apart. Applause rose, slowly at first, then louder, genuine. The band started playing again, tentative at first, then stronger. Grant took her hand as they walked away from the scene, leaving Evelyn standing in silence. But the night wasn't over yet, because behind every act of pride, there's always a shadow of reflection waiting to catch up. The applause didn't fade right away. It lingered, awkward, hesitant at first, then slowly shifting into something real. It wasn't just about the words anymore. It was about what everyone had seen, the tearing of a dress, the breaking of silence, the quiet kind of courage that forces people to look at themselves. Grant guided Vanessa toward one of the side corridors where the staff had discreetly stepped aside to give them space. The music behind them tried to smooth the air, but the tension in the room was still thick enough to feel. You sure you're okay? Grant asked again, voice softer now. Vanessa nodded, looking down at the torn edge of her gown. It's just fabric, she said, exhaling. I can fix it. Grant studied her face. It's not just fabric. It's the way she grabbed you, the way she looked at you, I know. Vanessa paused, her gaze distant. But if I let that define my night, she wins twice. Grant's lips curved into a faint smile, proud, a little sad. You always find grace when I want revenge. She looked up at him. That's because revenge doesn't build anything. Grace does. They stood there for a moment, the world muffled behind the ballroom doors. It could have ended there. A private injury, a quiet resolve. But word was spreading through the gala. People were whispering in corners, retelling what happened like it was a story they'd just witnessed on live TV. Some were angry for Vanessa, others were embarrassed for Evelyn, and a few were trying to decide which side of the room they should stand on, because in places like Harborview, silence was safer than honesty. Inside, Evelyn sat alone at her table, hands folded tightly. Her friends had drifted away. A waiter offered her a glass of water, and for once, she didn't correct the temperature or complain about the glass being smudged. She just stared at it, her face blank. The host approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he said cautiously, we'd like to resume the program. Tonight has been emotional, but it's also reminded us why we're here, to make change possible. There was a low murmur of agreement. Then the spotlight shifted toward the side door as Grant and Vanessa re-entered the room. The crowd turned quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, respectful. Grant motioned to the host, who handed him the microphone without a word. He stood at the center of the ballroom, tall and calm, scanning the faces of people who suddenly didn't know where to look. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, he began, but I think I need to. Vanessa watched him from near the stage, her heart swelling with both pride and worry. Grant continued, his tone measured, his words sharp enough to matter. My wife and I came here tonight to support this foundation because we believe every child deserves a chance to grow without limits, to learn, to create, to be seen. But what happened tonight shows we still have a lot of work to do. He paused, letting the silence settle. Because it's easy to write a check. It's harder to confront the bias that lives quietly inside rooms like this. The kind that doesn't shout, but whispers in assumptions, in looks, in questions like, are you sure you belong here? Evelyn's head dropped slightly. She didn't move. Grant's voice softened. I'm not here to shame anyone. We've all been blind at times. All of us. But when you're given the chance to open your eyes, don't look away. Don't hide behind excuses. Just do better. The crowd was still, hanging on every word. He handed the microphone back, reached for Vanessa's hand, and turned to her with a small, private smile. Let's go home, he whispered. But the host called out, before you leave, everyone, please join me in thanking the Coltons for their generosity tonight. The applause this time wasn't awkward. It was warm, united. A few people stood, then more. Before long, nearly the entire room was on its feet. Vanessa felt her throat tighten, but she didn't cry. She'd spent too many years teaching herself to stand tall, even when the world tried to shrink her. She leaned closer to Grant. Thank you, she said softly. For what? He asked. For reminding them who I am, without ever raising your voice. He smiled, squeezing her hand. You didn't need me to remind them. You did that yourself. But outside those ballroom doors, Evelyn wasn't done processing what had happened, and what she would do next. No one expected. The gala wrapped up an hour later, but it felt like no one really knew how to leave. Conversations were quieter, eye contact shorter. The air had changed. What started as a night of celebration had become something deeper, a mirror held up to everyone in that room. Outside the Harborview Hotel, the valet line moved slowly. Guests whispered goodbyes, some pretending nothing had happened, others speaking softly about what they'd seen. Evelyn Grant stood near one of the marble pillars, alone, her designer shawl draped awkwardly around her shoulders. She'd been in that same spot for almost 20 minutes, replaying every moment in her head. The rip, the silence, the way Grant Colton's voice had cut through her pride like a blade. When she finally saw Vanessa and Grant walking toward the valet, she hesitated. Her first instinct was to turn and disappear into her car, but something inside her stopped her feet from moving. Mrs. Colton, she called, her voice uneven. Vanessa paused, glancing at Grant, who gave a small nod before stepping aside to give them space. Evelyn swallowed hard, stepping closer. I wanted to apologize, she began. Her tone was softer now, stripped of the polish she'd always used as armor. What I said, what I did, it was wrong. Vanessa didn't respond immediately. She studied the woman in front of her, the one who, just an hour ago, had tried to tear her dignity apart. Evelyn fumbled with her hands. I don't even know why I reacted like that. Maybe I do. Maybe I've lived too long thinking the world should look a certain way, and tonight I realized how ugly that looks from the outside. The words hung between them, fragile but real. Vanessa's expression softened just a little. It takes courage to say that, she said quietly. But apology isn't the end. It's the beginning of something, if you mean it. I do, Evelyn said, nodding quickly. I really do. Vanessa gave a small smile. Then start there. Not for me, for yourself, for the people who'll look to you tomorrow and learn from what you choose to do next. Evelyn blinked back tears she hadn't expected. You're far kinder than I deserve. Maybe, Vanessa replied, but that's what breaks the cycle. She reached out her hand. Evelyn hesitated, then took it. The handshake wasn't long, but it was enough. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in comfort. It was forgiveness with responsibility. Grant returned just as Vanessa was letting go. He gave Evelyn a polite nod, not out of approval, but acknowledgement. Good night, Mrs. Grant, Vanessa said, turning toward the waiting car. Take care of yourself. Evelyn stood there, watching them leave. For the first time in years, she didn't feel powerful or admired. She just felt human, and maybe that was the start of something honest. Inside the car, Vanessa exhaled deeply, resting her head against the window as the city lights blurred past. You handled that with grace, Grant said quietly. Vanessa turned to him, a faint smile crossing her lips. Sometimes, grace is the only thing left when the world tries to take everything else. He nodded. Do you ever get tired of having to be the bigger person? Her eyes lingered on the road ahead. Every day, she admitted. But if I stop, I lose more than they ever took from me. Grant reached for her hand again. You know, he said softly, that's why I fell in love with you. Vanessa laughed lightly. No, you fell in love with me because I fixed your suit jacket at that gala in Charleston 5 years ago. He smiled. That too. The two of them sat in quiet comfort as the driver turned onto the main street, the golden glow of the hotel fading behind them. The night had taken something from Vanessa, but it had also revealed something to everyone else, because sometimes the loudest lessons come from the quietest dignity. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the Coltons' kitchen. The sound of coffee brewing filled the air as Vanessa sat at the small marble table, scrolling through her phone. Her inbox was flooded. Messages from reporters, fashion blogs, and even a few strangers who'd witnessed what happened at the gala. Some messages were angry, most were kind, but the one that caught her eye was short and simple. Thank you for standing tall last night. My daughter was there working as a server. She said she's never felt prouder to be who she is. Vanessa smiled, her eyes softening. That, she whispered, was worth it. Grant walked in, tie half done, coffee mug in hand. You're reading about it? She nodded. I wasn't going to. But I saw this message. She turned the screen toward him. He read it, then looked at her with quiet admiration. You made a bigger difference than you think. Vanessa sighed, looking out the window at the garden below. I didn't want it to be a scene, Grant. I just wanted to be seen. There's a difference. He nodded. You were. And so was the truth. Later that day, the Harborview Foundation released a statement online, publicly thanking Vanessa for her grace and confirming an anonymous donation had doubled the gala's total overnight. The comments section was filled with words like respect, lesson, change. Even Evelyn's name appeared once, not in anger, but in reflection. She'd issued her own apology through a letter that ended with, I'm learning that silence can harm just as much as words. I hope to be better. Vanessa didn't reply. She didn't need to. The moment had already done what it needed to. That night, as she worked at her sewing machine, repairing the same torn gown stitch by stitch, she realized something. Life had a way of testing what you're made of in public, not to embarrass you, but to remind you who you really are when it matters most. Each thread she pulled through the gold satin felt like reclaiming something. Not pride, not revenge, just peace. When she finished, she held up the gown under the lamplight. The tear was invisible now, almost like it had never happened. But she would never forget where it once was. Grant appeared in the doorway again. "Back at it already?" Vanessa smiled faintly. "Yeah, I figured if something gets torn, you fix it. You don't throw it away." He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "That's your gift, you know. You don't just design dresses, you mend what life tries to break." She leaned back against him, whispering, "One stitch at a time." The camera would fade out there, the faint sound of the sewing machine continuing, steady, purposeful, a reminder that grace isn't weakness, it's strength under control. Because at the end of the day, you can't control how people see you, but you can control how you respond when they try to tear you down. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm, stand tall, and let your dignity speak louder than their ignorance. If this story moved you, take a second to reflect. Treat people right no matter where they stand, what they wear, or what you assume about them. Because respect doesn't cost anything, but losing it can cost everything.